All right, today we are diving headfirst into the incredible world of urban agriculture. And I mean everything, from those amazing grassroots community gardens you see in your neighborhood, all the way to these gleaming, high-tech vertical farms that, let's be honest, look like they're straight out of a sci-fi movie. So let's get into it and see how we might actually be growing our food right in the heart of our cities.
Okay, so first things first, let's just set the stage here. Think about this. By the end of this century, our planet could be home to nearly 11 billion people. That's a lot of people. And it puts this immense, almost unbelievable strain on our traditional food systems, which, are already struggling with sustainability. So this brings us to one of the most critical questions of our time, really. How on earth are we going to feed our ever-growing cities?
Well, it turns out the answer might be found right in our own backyards, or maybe more accurately on our rooftops and inside our old warehouses. See, urban agriculture isn't some new trendy fad. It's actually the revival of a practice that's as old as cities themselves, just reimagined to solve the huge challenges of the 21st century.
So, what are we actually talking about here? What is urban agriculture, or UA? Well, officially, it's an industry that grows, processes, and sells food right inside or on the very edges of a city. And the most important part of that? It's all about responding directly to the daily demand from people in that city. It's about creating a truly hyper-local food system.
But what's really fascinating is that farming in cities is, well, it's nothing new. Not at all. This has been going on for centuries. I mean, it was practiced in ancient civilizations. In Edo-era Japan, they literally wove farmland right into residential areas. And you've probably heard of the victory gardens during the World Wars, right? That was a huge deal for boosting food production at home. So what we're seeing today is really just the latest chapter in a very, very long story. And here's what that looks like on the ground right now. On the left, you've got this vibrant community garden, which is so much more than just a place to grow food. It's a real community hub. And then on the right, you can see how creative urban farmers get, using raised beds, taking over any little patch of land they can find. This is really the foundation of the whole movement.
But urban farming is evolving. It's moving beyond the soil. So now we're going to pivot and look at something that feels truly futuristic. We're leaving the community garden behind for a minute and stepping into the wild world of vertical farming.
Okay, so vertical farming is a total game changer. Picture this. It's an indoor technique where absolutely everything, the light, the temperature, the nutrients, is perfectly, precisely controlled. And this lets you grow crops in these stacked layers, one right on top of the other. It just dramatically reduces the need for all that horizontal land.
So how do they do it? Well, one of the core technologies behind all this is called hydroponics. And to put it simply, it's just a way of growing plants without any soil. That's right, no soil. Instead, the roots are just hanging out in this nutrient-rich water solution that gives the plant literally everything it needs to thrive.
But like anything, it's a system of trade-offs. On the one hand, the pros are just astounding. A hydroponic lettuce farm, for example, can produce 11 times the yield of a traditional farm. And with no soil, boom, you've eliminated soil-borne diseases. But, and this is a big but, it can also use up to 82 times more energy. And there's another risk. If a waterborne disease gets into that system, it can wipe out the entire crop incredibly fast.
So, what's the next step? Well, the next evolution is called Aeroponics. And this takes the whole soilless concept even further. Get this, the plants are just suspended in the air and a nutrient-rich mist is sprayed directly onto their dangling roots. I mean, it is about as precise as you can possibly get with delivering nutrients.
And the biggest benefit here? Just look at this number, 95%. Aeroponics can use up to 95% less water than traditional soil-based farming. In a world where we're all worried about water scarcity, a figure like that is, well, it's nothing short of revolutionary.
So the pros are pretty clear, right? It uses even less water than hydroponics, and you don't have that risk of fast-spreading waterborne diseases. The downside, though, is that the technology is a lot more complex. And that means you're looking at higher startup costs, and you need to be constantly monitoring those high-pressure misting systems. It's a delicate operation. And finally, there's aquaponics, which is it's a beautiful, symbiotic ecosystem. It's like the perfect partnership. It combines fish farming with hydroponics. So the fish do their thing, produce waste, which is a perfect natural fertilizer for the plants, and in return, the plants filter and clean the water for the fish. It's this perfect closed-loop system where, really, everybody wins.
Okay, so we've geeked out on the tech, which is super cool.
But the real impact of urban agriculture goes way, way beyond the harvest. It holds this incredible promise for our cities, but, and you knew there was a but coming, it also comes with some very real, very complex problems we have to talk about.
Okay, let's talk about the good stuff first. The benefits are all over the map in the best way. Economically, we're talking new jobs, new ways for people to make a living. Health-wise, it means access to fresh food, plus green spaces that are so good for our mental well-being. Socially, it brings people together, builds community through shared gardens and workshops. And it makes our cities more resilient. Think about it. Shorter, more stable supply chains. That's a huge deal. And that resilience idea, that's really the core of it. Imagine your food being grown just a few blocks away, or maybe even a few floors up in a building downtown. You get direct access to the freshest produce possible. It just completely cuts out those long, often fragile transportation chains that our whole food system currently depends on.
But here's where we have to pause and ask a really tough, really critical question. As we start to green our cities and bring in all these amazing new farms, who is actually benefiting? Is this a solution that lifts up everyone in the community, or does it just help a select few?
And this is a really serious concern. The source material puts it pretty starkly with this quote. There's a very real danger that these wonderful, well-intentioned green initiatives can actually become tools of what's called environmental gentrification, where the very improvements that are meant to help a community end up pushing its longtime residents right out.
So let's break down these challenges a bit. First up, that environmental gentrification we just mentioned. New gardens and green spaces can make a neighborhood more desirable, which sounds great, but that often means property values go up, and that can displace the very people who are supposed to benefit. Then there's the economic reality. It's just tough. Small farms struggle with high costs, and those high-tech farms, they require a ton of money to get started. And finally, we can't ignore the environmental risks, everything from potentially contaminated soil in old city lots to that super high energy use we talked about with indoor systems.
So the big question is, how do we navigate all of this? How do we get the good stuff without the bad? Well, the answer, as it so often does, comes down to policy. It comes down to the actual rules that shape our cities.
And the most powerful tool in that toolbox is something called zoning. You've probably heard of it. It's basically just a rule book that tells you what you can build where. And for decades, the whole idea behind zoning was to keep things separate. You put homes over here, factories over there, and farms, well, farms were way, way out in the countryside.
And how that zoning rulebook is written makes a massive difference. For instance, if farming is a permitted use, that's like getting a green light. A farmer has the legal security to go ahead, operate, and invest for the long haul. But if it's only a conditional use, that's more like a yellow light. You need special approval, you face all this uncertainty, and that can be a huge barrier that stops a farm from ever even getting started.
So here's the bottom line. Our city's rule books, our zoning codes, were written for a world where farms just didn't belong in cities, period. And that fundamental mismatch creates these massive legal hurdles for the very people who are trying to build a more resilient, more sustainable food system today. You could say the software that runs our cities really needs an update.
Look, in the end, urban farming has the potential to be truly transformative. It could totally reshape our relationship with food, with our communities, and with our environment. But it's not some simple, magic bullet fix. It forces us to ask some really big questions. The technology is here, the potential is absolutely here. The real question we have to answer is, what kind of future are we going to choose to grow? Because this is about way more than just food.